Everybody, welcome. This is Jeffrey Weiss from Disaster Preparedness Network. We are here with Joel Ventresca, and I may have mispronounced that last name, but Joel, how you doing this morning?
I'm just fine. Thank you for inviting me to participate.
So Joel, we're going to talk with you about disaster preparedness and how you're going to help California as its new governor to thrive and survive when disasters happen, all kinds of disasters. So I'm going to get right into it. One of the things that I was looking at when I looked through your bio is how much experience you have with the airports, and you have lots of experience. Can you tell us about your experience with the airports?
Yes, I have 34 years of government experience working for the city and county of San Francisco. The last part of my career, 31 straight years, 3 decades, I worked at the city and county of San Francisco International Airport. And I worked across the organization, facilities, operation, maintenance, business, finance, safety, security, risk management. If I were to become the next new Democratic governor of California, without a doubt, I would be the best trained professional in risk management ever to serve in the office of governor. I did over 100 different trainings. I was trying to keep track of how many trainings I went through over 31 years. But while I was at the airport, we had the 1989 earthquake, and that we had to have a system-wide response to that. There was significant damage. The runways were closed down temporarily. We had to check to make sure they were safe for landing aircraft. And then we had to document everything for FEMA. And so we had an organizational-wide response to a major earthquake at this airport that I worked at, and I was heavily involved with that. And then years later, of course, we had 9/11 in 2001, and it became very clear to everyone throughout the country that an international airport like the San Francisco International Airport was a target and has been a target for terrorism for many years. And some of our intelligence agencies have picked up intelligence indicating that international organizations, particularly international airports, and even SFO, where I worked at, was targeted by bad actors in the rest of the world because they wanted to go after targets that would target their terrorism. So we had to respond to all of that. And I remember the day of 9/11, I had to hustle into work because of what occurred on the East Coast. And then I hustled into work. And by midday that day on 9/11/2001, I was outside of my office building, and it was very eerie because there was no sound of aircraft landing and taking off, just nothing. And
wow,
of course,
that's amazing.
And of course, we're a big international institution, a lot of planes landing and taking off. And that just showed that we absorbed a shock that there was a major terrorist effort around the world. It had targeted the United States, and SFO, San Francisco International Airport, had to respond accordingly. So we designed so we did audits, safety, security, risk management, and we tried to reorganize our organization to maximize safety, security, and be able to risk all the management that we were facing. But just as the San Francisco International Airport, where I worked for 3 decades, faced disaster, California today is facing disasters on multiple fronts.
Absolutely.
which we'll probably get into some of the details. But in my opinion, what we're currently doing on disaster risk management in the state, I think, is completely inadequate.
Okay.
We can talk about some of those issues.
Yeah, I wanted on that first question to get more into, I wanted to get a synopsis of who you are and what's your background in the airport. And then, you talked about 9/11, because I activated for 9/11 with the Red Cross and was over in New York helping out. And it's important that we understand that our major institutions have this. And so as governor, you will be in charge of working with FEMA and working with it to make sure that our airports, not just the international airports, but all the smaller airports, and every airport is and not only airports, but every, so using your risk management background and all that, what are you going to do to secure and protect the citizens of California and the citizens of this country? Because people coming into California are under your purview as well. What are you going to do to protect the citizens against, and not only just international terrorists, but now we're looking at domestic terrorism and civil unrest and all these things? How are you going to protect us in that aspect?
Well, the key approach when you're dealing with safety, security, and risk management is you have to accurately collect data so you can define what the level of risk is. You have to do risk-benefit analysis. You have to mobilize your resources, people and resources, to minimize the risk. And every type of disaster that California could be facing, wildfires, blackouts, earthquakes, domestic terrorism, international terrorism, a collapsing economy because of a supply chain problem in Southern California. Okay, all of these issues, you have to collect comprehensive, accurate data. You have to, of course, follow the science. And then you have to make sure that all the stakeholders that are involved with protecting our institutions and our state and our society are participating in the process. Right. So you get all the stakeholders involved. You make sure you follow science. You get the facts. You do risk-benefit analysis. You prioritize where you put people and resources, focusing on where the risk is highest.
Yes.
And then also, there is very clear things that we need to do long-term. For example, with the drought crisis, we're going to have to seriously look at the coastline and building a series of desalination plants so we can get the salt out of the ocean water and use it for domestic use in the state long-term. We got to look at that. The one check on it is we got to make sure we have the energy that it takes to do that. And of course, the energy cannot come from the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
Another thing is, in terms of earthquake, I'm a strong believer in county-wide and city-wide drills annually.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. I will talk to you about earthquake because that's a big part of what I'm important, because I do the big shakeout every year, and I do a lot of stuff with the Red Cross and with CERT to help people prepare and so they can thrive and survive any disaster.
But before you get to a specific issue, I do want to make a point.
Yes.
That if people have been following the disasters that are piling up potentially in California, I want people to be reassured that if I became the governor, we're going to take a new approach that's comprehensive, so we can maintain safety and security for the people throughout the state of California. And one of the key roles, and this is sort of like a new role that the governor of California must play, because California is the fifth largest economy in the world if it were a nation state. We're also the most populous state in the nation. We're also a leader of the United States in risk management. So I want to reassure people that we're going to roll up our sleeves and have the best risk management program in a state dealing with all of our potential disasters. But a key part of the role of being governor of California is, and you have to wake up every day with this focused attention, you have to avert catastrophe. And there are many catastrophes or risks or disasters that we're facing. But the new reality of being governor of California is you must avert catastrophe and do everything that's humanly possible to protect life and limb and property and our economy.
Very, very cool. So you brought up the natural disasters. We're entering into fire season here. We're starting into fire season in California. California is one of the biggest states in the United States for damage from fire control. We don't get hurricanes. We don't get too much. We don't get tornadoes, we except for small ones here and there. Fires are a big thing. Corporations have been responsible for a lot. I mean, humans, yes, the stakeholders, and gender reveal parties and people being careless and all that. But a lot of things, like Paradise County was destroyed because of PG&E. Because a power company didn't monitor. How are you going to hold accountable the power companies, and how are you going to support our county fire departments, our national forest rangers, and our local fire departments and local community organizations like CERT and Red Cross to help people prevent fires from happening, manage the fires once they happen, and recover once we're finished with them.
Okay, well, wildfires are a major issue in California. It has been in recent years, and all the analysis shows it's going to get progressively worse. So we have to look at this from multiple advantage points. First of all, people need to realize that Gavin Newsom's family took $700,000 over his long career from Pacific Gas and Electric Company. And he has let PG&E do essentially whatever they want. And PG&E has created one disaster after another. We have the risk of PG&E's nuclear power plant facing a meltdown if there were to be a tsunami, just like what happened in Fukushima over 10 years ago in Japan, where all the safety mechanisms collapsed because of the water overflow. And PG&E is operating that plant, and so we're at risk of a nuclear meltdown that could make part of that part of the state uninhabitable. Of course, we need to close that as quickly as possible. The other thing is PG&E doesn't maintain their equipment. They charge us gouging rates, and then they put the money in their pocket for their investors and their executives, and then they don't maintain their equipment. And we've had wildfires caused by equipment that PG&E just didn't even look at for decades up close. Right. They just didn't even look at it for decades. So PG&E, and they've been criminally held responsible for killing people by their negligence. We do have many wildfires that are caused by they don't maintain their equipment. And my approach as the new governor would be not to do what Gavin Newsom has done. I would set it up so we would have a statewide public power system where the consumers own the system. And the three investor-owned utilities, PG&E being one of the three, there's two in Southern California, they'll become part of a statewide energy system where we redo the generation, the transmission, and the distribution of the energy. And of course, we're going to shift towards renewable energy. And in terms of generation, we're going to create more and more solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and we'll do conservation, and we're going to do batteries, but we're going to have major solar power plants in the state. I mean, a lot of the state is a desert, and we can have transmission lines generating the solar electricity and bringing it into our cities on the coastline, where about 80% of the population of the state lives. So I would get rid of whatever. Gavin Newsom's approach was just let PG&E act criminally and irresponsibly and negligently, do whatever they want. And of course, he did that bailout for future disasters by PG&E that people on Wall Street like, but it led to 20% rate increases in California, Northern California, where in PG&E service area. So we would go after the climate change issue. We would make sure the public owns the energy system so it can operate safely and reliably, and it can be state of the art so we can plan our future. We get rid of Wall Street, the investor-owned utilities. We get rid of PG&E. Right. We get rid of the nuclear power plant. But we need to reduce risk and plan for the future. And we do need energy independence. Sometimes we can't bring energy from other states or other nations, and we're going to have to generate our own energy to maintain the type of economy that we want. I believe once we get the energy sector fixed, we're going to be able to grow our economy from the fifth largest economy. We could grow it and make it the fourth largest economy in the world. And we can do it reliably, safely, and get rid of all the rot that Newsom and PG&E has been embracing.
Okay, great. That's a great answer. On the second part of that question is, what are you going to do to support the organizations, government and non-government organizations, that help support people during forest and other fires, like county fire departments, city fire departments, organizations like the CERT and the Red Cross, and other organizations that help support people and help them recover?
Okay, so I worked for 3 decades in a major international organization that had many private public partnerships, including nonprofits. So I know how to marshal the private sector and the not-for-profit sector and the public sector at every level, federal, state, and local. You bring everybody together, you figure out what the needs are. We're going to have to expand the funding, the training, and the public awareness when these disasters may be coming at us one after another. So we have to do a lot of massive mobilization, and we're going to bring all the stakeholders, all the players together, make sure they have proper funding. And I want them to work together seamlessly, like it's a quilt. It's all working together to save lives and property and to reduce harm. So I'm used to doing that, and I'll do that as governor of California. But just on the wildfire front, I believe we need to triple the wildfire force, the firefighters that need to be basically on call 365 days a year. And we need to triple the firefighter force that can be mobilized anywhere in the state when wildfires break out. And I think we also need to invest much more in equipment, to get the water and the repellent to the right place at the right time. And we can have better communications, and we can do our own monitoring of, for example, PG&E's faulty equipment. Waiting for them to do it, I think we can't do that. PG&E, in my opinion, they're not a reliable company. And of course, I want to get rid of them. But but we need to triple our firefighting force just dedicated to wildfires in the north and in the south that can be mobilized. And I want them to be well paid, well trained. I want them to have reinforcements, and I want them to be able to mobilize, just how we can mobilize our military to deal with the national crisis. Well, we need to mobilize our firefighters that have expertise in fighting wildfires and mobilize them in the state wherever they're needed. And I would triple that workforce, and I would keep them on duty year round. And it's going to be new careers, and it's going to be successful careers. And we're going to make sure that that workforce is there. I also think.
So talking on that, county fire departments all over the state use convict labor, people who to help fight our fires. These convicts get trained in how to fight fires by those fire departments, but because they have a felony on their record, when they get out of jail and they're no longer fighting fires, they cannot be firefighters because there's a felony on their record. Some of these felonies are misdemeanor drug offenses and this and that, not theft or not murders, not anything that would cause them to do. So the state of California has passed this law many years ago. Governor Newsom decided not to overturn this, even though the fire department has asked them, many fire departments have asked them to do it, so that convicts who have small offenses, once they graduate and once they get out of prison and they've learned a career, can now get a job as a fire department and be one of those forces that you say you're going to triple. As governor, do you think you could see it to have some compromise with and help these convicts once they get out of prison to find the jobs that they've now been training for years?
Okay, on this specific issue, I will work with the state legislature to change law, regulation, and policy so this will no longer be a barrier for people who want to move from being an ex-prison inmate to a professional firefighter long-term. And of course, I support unions. I support training. I believe in training and supervision. And it's tough being a wildfire firefighter. It's tough.
It is.
It's dangerous. But I do want people who want to pursue that career. And of course, I want to recruit more and more people. As I said, I want to triple the workforce. But I believe I can get rid of that barrier because if we don't, we're going to have more. How many paradises have to burn down before we realize that we need people that are trained and reliable, and they pay their debt to society, and they want to make a contribution going forward in fighting wildfires? Then I will get rid of that barrier if it takes a statewide ballot measure. But I think in this case, it's just going to be a matter of the governor and the legislature.
It's just a legislature issue because it's a state law.
Right. So the governor and the legislature can pass law, regulation, and policy changes. I'll do that on this front. I'll knock down this barrier.
So the next thing I want to bring up is something that's also on your agenda from what I read, which is homelessness. Now, homelessness is a big issue, and you can talk to us about how you're going to combat homelessness, but we want to talk about it from a disaster point of view. During a disaster, people are displaced. So you'll have people with homes who are now homeless, like we had in the Northridge earthquake and the San Francisco earthquake, when people's homes were trashed, and now people are homeless. But we also have the homeless population, and having to manage and get resources to those people when resources are hard to get by because freeways and things have collapsed, so you can't get emergency services to those people. How are you going to handle the homeless population now that exists, the homeless pandemic that exists, and how are you going to handle people who are homeless because of disaster emergencies and the pandemic emergencies? The pandemic is also going to cause a lot of people to become homeless because as soon as the mandate for evictions goes, there'll be lots of people being evicted because they never pay their rent.
Okay, so let's do those in reverse order.
Okay,
homeowners are facing evictions because they can't pay the mortgage.
Right.
Tenants are facing evictions because they can't pay the rent.
Right.
And it looks like we're going into a recession. And of course, if you start evicting homeowners from their homes and you start evicting tenants from their apartments, all you're doing is adding to the homeless crisis in the state. So I believe the governor and the legislature should work together to get rent control in place so counties and cities can try to freeze rents and hopefully bring some rents down. Because in some cities in our state, the rents are out of control. It's like no relationship to what's going on in the nation. It's landlords gouging tenants. And of course, they're in a constant state of fear that they're going to get evicted or the bank's going to come in and take their property in terms of mortgages. So for 3 years, I will make sure that tenants and homeowners that are teetering on maybe becoming homeless, I want to make sure they have financial help for 3 years to get back on their feet. And a key part of that would be to allow rent control at the county and city level to freeze rents or bring down rents. I do not support evictions or foreclosure just coming out of the pandemic. We're in the 5th wave of the pandemic. We're not at the other end of it. So I don't want people to be evicted from their homes or from their apartments. So we have to stabilize them so the homeless crisis doesn't get worse. Okay, the second thing on the pandemic. The pandemic, as I mentioned, we're in a 5th wave. Dr. Fauci just the other day anticipated a 6th wave this winter. And we're talking about a 5th vaccine shot, which I actually heard Fauci talk about it just the other day. So 1, 2, 3, 4 may not be enough. There may need to be a 5th is if we go into a 6th wave in California that could be a problem. And so people may need to, people most vulnerable may need a sixth shot come the winter time. But as governor, I will always manage the whole issues about mandates related to vaccines and masks. I will act cautiously, and I will make sure that I'm following the science. We're tracking the data accurately. We're not fudging the data. And then I'm going to educate the public about what the risks are and what they can do to reduce risk from getting a breakthrough case of COVID or getting COVID for the first time. And there's a whole part of the population, of course, who doesn't want to get it at all, particularly the vulnerable. So I will have a whole set of approaches to the pandemic, because the approach has to be keep as many people safe for as long as possible. So there's not death or maiming, because some people are subject to long-term COVID after they get over it. And of course, that needs to be more studied. And then there may need to be a response to that. So the pandemic, I'm going to follow the science. I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to do public education. I'm not sending mixed messages. The economy and the schools will remain all open. And let me repeat that. The economy and the schools will remain open with reasonable precautions to protect as many people as possible. But Newsom closed the schools for 1 year and sent his own kids to school for in-person learning at a private school, and millions of children throughout the state fell behind in their studies. Okay, that cannot happen. And when young people get COVID, they have less risk of a bad outcome. Then most of the 2/3 of the people dying of COVID are very elderly. And of course, right, when you're elderly, you have a suppressed immune system. You may have some underlying health conditions, and of course you don't want to get it. But children, because they're younger, they have a young immune system. The risk for them in terms of death or harm, it's smaller. And of right, course, there was absolutely no justification to close the public schools for 1 year. And this was just grandstanding on the part of Newsom. Millions of children were damaged. He wasn't following the science. He sent mixed messages, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow the science and educate the public about everything that we're doing to protect their business, their lives, their families, their way of life. Okay, now homelessness. Homelessness is a major problem in the state of California. We're being beaten up on Fox News every night saying, don't do business in California. And if you're in California, flee. And California has, all of this homelessness on the streets. Okay, there are 160,000 homeless people living in the state of California. They're out in the elements in most cases, and they have very tough challenges that they're facing. Now, what I'm going to do as governor is we're going to have decent shelter, food, and clothing with adjacent services and help and assistance and treatment if they need it to get back on their feet. Now, I want people to voluntarily come into a program, and I want them to have decent shelter, food, clothing, plus the appropriate services that they need. And then I'm going to gradually get people back on the road to self-sufficiency. And whatever challenges they're facing, whether it's addiction or whether it's emotional trauma, or whether it's women with dependent children or homeless people with a dog. Okay, I'm going to have a program where they can go into it with the intention that we're going to help rebuild their self-esteem, get them engaged in a program, and get back on the road to self-sufficiency. Right. Because I don't want to, there's just too many people to say that they need to be dependent on the government. Now, yeah, short term, 3 or 4 years, yeah, maybe. Okay, but I want people to know that if they have a crisis and they're homeless, I want them to know that there's going to be a government statewide program, government directed. And here, I think there's minimal things that the nonprofit sector can do. This is such a massive problem that I believe it needs to be government directed, government funded, and of course, everything has to be done to help people get off the streets and get back on the road to self-sufficiency. I also understand that some people, after living on the streets for many years, and maybe they have a substance abuse issue, that cognitively they could be, in decline. It could be that they may not be able to be functional.
Right.
But what I will do is, and I think we may be talking 10 to 15% of the 160,000 that are out on the street. But I want to reassure people that if a person is a danger to themselves or a danger to others, we will document it. We will protect their due process rights, their civil liberties. We'll get them before a judge, and then we're going to get them into a safe space.
Right.
I'm not going to force treatment. I don't want one flew over the cuckoo's nest forced treatment. So I don't want that. But people can be off the streets in a safe place, and they may not be able to leave. But we're not going to force treatment on them. But we'll give them a menu of programs that could help them get to a better place, trauma, addiction, whatever it is. And I want them to voluntarily give informed consent to participate in how they get better as a person. We have to empower the individual to realize that, the government can offer a helping hand, but you have to grab the other hand on the other side and participate in your own self-improvement. And
Okay,
so,
Joel.
but 160,000 people cannot be living out in the elements in California. It's affecting our economy. It's damaging our reputation in the country.
Right.
Gavin
And
Newsom,
the globe as well.
and the globe. And Gavin Newsom, when he was mayor of San Francisco here, which is where I'm from, the homeless crisis just got worse and worse. He never solved it. And as governor, the homeless crisis has gotten worse and worse. He'll never solving it. He's a grandstander. He wants to get in front of TV cameras. He doesn't want to solve the problem. As the new Democratic governor of California, I will solve the problem. We cannot have so many people living in desperate straits out on the streets. It's got to stop. We have the resources to address this.
I agree, Joel, and that's a great answer. My last question for you returns to, recently we had in Buffalo, we had 10 Black people killed by a crazy madman who believed in some crazy theory of replacement theory, which is, being pushed all over on Fox by Tucker Carlson and many others. We had an Taiwanese man who killed another Taiwanese because he was unhappy with that political message. And every time we see these mass murderers kill people, we say it's a horrible, horrible thing. Everyone cries and moans, and then a few weeks later we just move on, and we're waiting for the next one. There are 25 mass shootings every year, killing hundreds of people. We don't have proper education to educate things. Companies do superficial first-person shooter training, but it's not really trained. And yes, there are drills here and there, but we are not doing anything to help people understand about how to survive those things and how to prevent these things. Our law enforcement is not spotting these people. Our schools are not spotting these people. Our communities are not spotting these people early enough. What are you going to do to combat this disaster that is killing hundreds and hundreds of people a year?
Okay, I think social media often has echoes or hints about a mass murderer in the making.
Right.
And I think law enforcement, federal, state, and local, with warrants, with surveillance that's appropriate, we should monitor this, and there needs to be intervention, hopefully before a disaster happens. So I'm open to doing that. I think Silicon Valley, social media, they have no interest in doing that, but the government has an interest in doing it because we don't want mass shootings. Okay, and I think we can do it with law, regulation, and policies that is not trampling on civil liberties or the Bill of Rights. So I think that's fine. Now, in California, we have 107 current gun control laws on the book. A lot of them are, minor in their features. And of course, I support all of those because, I'm fine with having gun control to get guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. And the latest example is there's building evidence that we had a mentally ill person, and he's on social media and he's buying all these guns and he's stalking people and he's going through a trial run and then he's live streaming. Okay, this all suggests to me that law enforcement should have picked this up earlier, and they had contact with the individual. You know, it seemed to me he shouldn't have been out on the streets. Maybe he needed to be in a mental hospital, you know, when he did interact with law enforcement. Okay, so, and there's also a major problem with violence against girls and women in households.
Right.
There's all these studies that have come out, but guns in households, when somebody commits suicide and when someone's killed, it's like the woman.
Right.
And it's by the gun owner or joint gun owner in that house. Okay, well, that's got to stop. Okay, you can't get a gun for self-protection, and then we have a disproportionate number of significant others and women being killed or maimed by, you know, someone in that household. Okay, so we have to address that issue, and I'm prepared to do that as well. But basically, I'm for strict gun control. I will do everything I can as governor to get strict gun control in place. It has to get through court challenges at the state and the federal level. And if something gets knocked out, you try something else. But what we're doing isn't working. And what we need to do is be more aggressive. And I think gun control, particularly in cities, need to be much more aggressive. You know, out in a rural area where you got a rifle for hunting, it's not a big deal. You know, there's not many people living there. But in LA and major cities, we've seen a significant increase in the homicide rate. And we have to address that. Some of it's gang related. Of course, we need to infiltrate those gangs and bring those murderers to justice. And that's a very complex process, but I would put the resources into it. I mean, criminal gangs operating with impunity with all these people being murdered, this has got to stop. And we need to have a much more aggressive approach to this, because we got to get the homicide rate down. I mean, we have to make our society as safe as possible. And mass shooting, gun violence, violence against women that involves gun in many cases, we have to address these issues and systematically come up with laws, regulation, and policies and implement them so we can protect lives and property.
Very good. Well, thank you, Joel. So I want you to tell us how we can help support your campaign and where we can find out more information about you.
Yes. Well, if you got the California Official Voter Information Guide, and you might have gotten many things mailed to you about the June 7th election coming up in a few days. When you have the California Official Voter Information Guide, go to page 22. I have a substantial statement in there, and I'm the only candidate for governor with a substantial statement in the Voter Information Guide. Take a look at it, page 22. The second thing is go to my website, www.joelventresca, one word, JoelVentresca.com. I have all this information and a lot more information about my background and what direction I would take the state in on the website. And hopefully you'll have a chance to review that. And I hope you'll, if you support the ideas and the approach I would take to governing the state of California, I hope you and your friends would consider voting for me.
Well, thank you, Joel. And remember, people, that the polls are, you can vote now. You can see that I voted here. And so the polls are, you can vote right now. You can, absentee ballots and the polls, you can find poll locations. Just contact your local neighborhood council, your local city council, or any representative, or look on the internet and try to find. Voting is open now. Primary elections are very, very important. Sometimes they're I think they're sometimes the most important one, because after the primary election, whoever wins the primary election, those are the people on the ballot. And if your choice is not on the ballot, then you don't get to vote for your choice. So if you want to change it,
now, can I just interject here?
yes, absolutely, please do.
We changed the rules in California recently, in recent years, and you're going to have two Democrats. I mean, Newsom's a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. You're going to have two Democrats if they come in first and second in a runoff in November.
Right.
And of course, that's what I want, because I want to talk about what kind of future we can have. And then it would force Newsom to talk about his terrible record over the last 4 years.
Right.
But like you said a moment ago, everyone, all 22 million registered voters in the state of California got a prepaid postage live ballot mailed to your home. So you can fill out the ballot. It's prepaid postage. You can put it in any mailbox and you can participate in the election that way. And in addition to that, if you don't want to do that, wherever you are in the state of California, there is a polling place that you can go vote on election day if you prefer that. So you can vote at a polling place on election day, or you can fill out a live ballot, prepaid postage, and put it in any mailbox, and it'll get counted. And of course, I hope you'll consider voting for me for governor of California.
Well, thank you, Joel, so much for clarifying that. And so please do make sure you go vote. Whoever you vote for, we support you. But if you want to choose Joel, please check him out. Joel Ventresca. That's Joel.
Joel. V as in Victor. ENTRESCA.com. And Joel Ventresca is one word. That'll get you to the website.
Well, very cool. Thank you, Joel. And thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video that you see here. We really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed already, we have lots of different videos on our channel, from disaster preparedness to first-person shooters to tips that can help you out, and these interviews with various candidates running for office. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you later. Thank you, Joel. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, I'm stopping the recording now.